Black lives are under attack, what do?
A call for action and fight for change.
We will not be silenced.
Community members and leaders made their voices heard in front of Allentown City Hall Monday afternoon.
What you guys are looking at right here is footage of a protest from a couple of months ago where a bunch of people in the black community decided to rally around an Allentown City employee known as LaTarsha Brown. And the reason why they decided to rally behind her is because she, at that point in time, had told the public that she was the victim of evil white racism at her workplace. A city employee was confronted with a noose that was put on her desk in order to greet her because evil white racism is so strong in this country that not even people working in government buildings can expect to escape it. It was absolutely horrendous, a traumatic experience, and we have all these different people coming out in full force in order to support her, talking about how they will not be silenced, how they will fight back, and how, of course, Black Lives Matter.
Just to think that people have to go to work in fear for their lives.
Since Friday, Allentown police continue to investigate an item resembling a noose found on a city employee's desk.
This egregious act is not just an affront to one individual, but it is an attack on the entire community.
Several spoke during a rally, calling for transparency, prevention, and an immediate federal investigation among a list of demands.
And obviously, this story is very troubling. The idea that a beautiful black woman cannot even go to work for the city of Allentown without fearing for her life, without fearing evil white racism, is absolutely terrible. It's absolutely horrific, and I am fully 100% in support of these people rallying as a community against said evil white racism, because we all know the biggest problem in this entire country is in fact that evil white racism. Let's get a little bit more of the protest that they decided to initiate based on the fact that the beautiful, stunning, and brave LaTarsha Brown ended up having what looked like a noose put on her desk.
This incident, community members note, is not the first racial discrimination issue City Hall has dealt with. Josie Lopez is a close friend of the victim.
They're always a community leader, always pushing for equality. They might be bruised right now, but they're not broken.
Oh, so you said that it was a white guy. What happened?
So right there, you guys heard the call for a federal investigation, a call for transparency, and of course, a friend of the alleged victim in this particular case, speaking out on her behalf, talking about how this is a stunning and brave and beautiful, strong black woman who is not going to be intimidated, not going to be shamed, not going to be attacked by these evil white racists. Now, of course, those of you out there in the audience who could read the title of this video, who could look at the thumbnail of this video, know that this was actually revealed to be a hoax.
The victim is not being named due to safety concerns.
Our colleague was threatened. This was an act of terror. This was a hate crime.
Oh, so you said that it was a white guy. What happened?
It was fraudulent. It was absolutely ridiculous from top to bottom, but I think it's important for you guys to take in and drink up the hysteria that was put out immediately after these allegations were leveled, because the fact is, these types of hoaxes oftentimes lead to policy change in the immediate, only to be discovered that those policy changes are based on lies. However, the fact that they're based on lies doesn't often result in a reversal. So you see all these different various people out there chanting Black Lives Matter, talking about how a black person is afraid to even go to work in the city of Allentown, discussing about how, oh my God, it's an attack not just on this one woman, but the whole community, when in reality, what we actually see is that this is an attack on white people overall, an attack on the character of Allentown, perpetuated by somebody who so desperately wanted to be a victim that she was willing to do so, victimize herself for this very result. Now, we're going to break this down. We're going to talk about this in greater detail, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Roque. I'm the Chief of Police of Allentown. I'm joined at the podium by Captain Steve Bilkovitz and Detective Harold Bonser of our Criminal Investigations Division. The purpose of this press conference is to provide an update regarding the noose investigation. I want to take a moment to thank the following agencies who assisted in this case: the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office, the Pennsylvania State Police Crime Lab, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Allentown Police Department conducted a thorough investigation, including interviews with persons, analysis of evidence, and consultation with the District Attorney's Office of Lehigh County. As a result of the subsequent investigation, LaTarsha Brown was charged with tampering with or fabricating physical evidence of a misdemeanor of the second degree, and false reports to law enforcement, a misdemeanor of the third degree.
So right off the top, you see the police chief for the Allentown Police Department thank all the different agencies and subdivisions of agencies that ended up assisting in the solving of this particular crime. And of course, this is the press conference from today where they talked about how, guess what, this was in fact a hoax. And honestly, we knew pretty early on that it was a hoax, but what we ultimately end up seeing through these investigations is that the news gets out, all these different government agencies end up getting involved because everybody's terrified of the prospect of evil white racism, and everything that we're told about the disadvantages that black people have, black women have, are proven false by the actions surrounding this case. Again, the FBI, a crime lab, all these different other agencies came together in order to investigate a piece of rope that was left on this woman's desk. It turned out allegedly it was left by her, and there's compelling evidence to suggest that, and yet all of these people are still going to complain in the protests about how black people never get a fair shake from law enforcement, about how black people and their issues are never taken seriously, when what we see is that not only in the early days of the Trump administration, but in the waning days of the Biden administration, this was investigated by a multitude of agencies, despite the fact that from the jump, it seemed very likely that this was a hoax. And this will be explained to you in great detail throughout the course of this particular press conference. Let's cut back to it, and then I'll bring back my own commentary.
On January 10, 2025, at approximately 7:11 a.m., Allentown City employee LaTarsha Brown arrived at her office on the third floor of City Hall. At approximately 7:38 a.m., Ms. Brown notified the Allentown Police Department that she discovered what she believed to be a noose on her desk upon arriving at work. Officers assigned to the Community Outreach Unit, Crime Scene Identification Unit, and Criminal Investigations Unit responded, initiating a criminal investigation to identify the individual responsible for placing the noose on Ms. Brown's desk. During the investigation, video surveillance and building access control records were reviewed to identify city employees present on the third floor of City Hall between the time Ms. Brown left for work on the afternoon of January 9, 2025, and her arrival on the morning of January 10th. Those employees were interviewed. Each was asked if they would provide a buccal swab for DNA testing if needed. Every employee agreed, except for Ms. Brown.
So right here we find out that on January 10th at 7:11 in the morning, LaTarsha Brown ended up reporting that this noose was placed on her desk, and the police immediately went to work. They started canvassing the area, they reviewed the surveillance video, and they tracked down each and every person that had been in the office between January 9th and, of course, between her arrival on January 10th. They also asked all of those different employees, who again, they interviewed really quickly, whether or not they would willingly provide a DNA sample if required, and each and every one of them ended up saying yes, except for, of course, LaTarsha Brown. Now, for those of you who are unaware, what they would be looking for in this particular case is touch DNA, because in reality, you don't buy rope in the shape of a noose. Oftentimes, you have to tie it yourself, and if you do it with your bare hands, you're actually going to be embedding your DNA not only on the outside, which, by the way, any person who touched it would leave their touch DNA on the outside, but you could also embed your DNA on the inside, where the knot is, of course, met, where it's joined. And this is actually what they did in this particular case. They ran this particular noose for DNA, for touch DNA. They were able to discover not only samples on the outside, but samples on the inside, and they ultimately ended up discovering that those samples were of the same person, and it was only one person who had touched this rope and left this DNA sample on it.
Initially cooperative, Ms. Brown later requested that the investigation be discontinued.
Now, they're going to explain the DNA that I just told you a little bit later in this press conference. It is linked in full in the description, by the way, if you want to check it out. But don't you think it would be something that, would be worthy of broadcasting in the news media, that LaTarsha Brown, who was initially cooperative in this particular investigation, decided very quickly after that she wanted the investigation to be discontinued when they started asking about DNA, when they started explaining touch DNA, and that they would be able to identify the person who tied this rope? Don't you think that maybe we shouldn't have had to wait 2 months to speculate on the fact that this was a fake hate crime hoax, a framing of the white people in Allentown, Pennsylvania, another Jussie Smollett style incident? But no, this was not put out there. The police ended up conducting their investigation. The FBI ended up conducting their investigation. And even though very early on, the fact that she wanted to withdraw her report was quite indicative of the fact that it was a hoax, the local news media decided to run multiple different reports. Her friend was trotted out there to talk about what a strong and brave and beautiful black woman that she was, and of course you had all these different people in the black community that came out, rallied on her behalf, chanted Black Lives Matter, talked about how this was indicative of a broader problem in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and now they all look like complete and utter fools, which, by the way, I guess is hilarious. I guess it is well deserved because they bit on this particular hoax like they've done so many hoaxes in the past. But the fact is, a huge portion of the population for 2 months believed that a black woman would not be safe in an Allentown city building and would have a noose left on her desk because evil white racism is so prevalent. This is what occurs, and many people do not follow up on these stories. Many people do not realize that this hoax was revealed to be a hoax, and they end up taking that with them, and that skews their perception of the United States of America. And by the way, she was charged with misdemeanors: misdemeanor false report, misdemeanor tampering or planting evidence. But in my opinion, maybe some of these crimes should be escalated to the level of a felony, because what would have happened if somebody who is white in the office happened to touch this particular rope because they saw it on her desk? They were the ones who reported it, and their touch DNA ended up being put on there. Do you think LaTarsha Brown would have just let it go, or do you think she would have tried to pin the whole entire thing on that particular employee? How far do you think LaTarsha Brown is willing to go with this particular framing? Again, think about the Jussie Smollett incident. If there were potentially 2 white guys that were out in that polar vortex in and around the area that particular night, and they ended up getting arrested and brought in for questioning, would Jussie Smollett have identified those 2 white guys as the perpetrators in that crime? We don't know, but these people are absolutely ideologically motivated. They want to be the victims, and I wouldn't put it past them, yet they're only being charged with misdemeanors in this particular case.
The noose was submitted to the Pennsylvania State Police Crime Lab for DNA testing on January 14, 2025. On January 24, 2025, a search warrant was approved by the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office for Ms. Brown's DNA, and a DNA sample was obtained that same day. On January 27, 2025, Ms. Brown's buccal swab was submitted to the Bethlehem Regional Crime Lab of the Pennsylvania State Police for comparison with DNA profiles recovered from the noose. On March 10, 2025, the Forensic DNA Division of the Pennsylvania State Police issued a written report indicating that Ms. Brown's DNA matched the DNA profile obtained from the swabs of both the outer surface and inner knotted portion of the noose after it was taken apart. No other person's DNA profiles found on the evidentiary items involved in this investigation.
Now look, I explained the DNA thing earlier on to you guys on why it's absolutely crucial that not only it was only her DNA outside the noose, which she could say because she touched it, that's why her DNA is there, but it was also inside the knot, because this proves that she would be the person who would have tied this particular knot, because again, the ropes are running up against her. This is like if you were doing a thing where you're trying to match a firearm and you have fingerprints on the gun, and the person has a legitimate reason for why they might have touched the outside of the gun, but each individual bullet actually has their fingerprints as well, which proves that they in fact loaded the gun and they had contact with it prior to the moment in time that they said that they had contact with it. But what I also want to focus on is the dates that were given to us in this particular press conference, because this incident was reported to the police on January 10th. On January 14th, they ended up doing a DNA test of this particular noose. They disassembled it. They did the DNA test on the inside of the noose, and on January 24th, 2025, they ended up getting a warrant for LaTarsha's DNA, and of course the lab takes a little while, and on March 10th, they had proven that it was in fact a match to her DNA. This was all done incredibly quickly. Obviously, other DNA testing was bumped down in order for this to take precedent over it, and I can only imagine if you are waiting on the results of a rape kit or some kind of other DNA testing, which by the way, there are significant backlogs across the country for DNA testing related to that, and you find out that this stupid hoax where nobody got hurt ended up taking priority over that. Again, the misdemeanor charges do not seem like they fit this particular crime, because you got to think about all the time, energy, and resources that were devoted to this stupid case, despite the fact that it was absurd from the jump, and of course LaTarsha backing down and trying to withdraw the report hours after she made it, or maybe a day after she made it, is obviously incredibly suspicious. Now, I want to make something 100% clear for everybody out there in the audience. Obviously, everything is alleged right now. LaTarsha Brown is entitled to the same innocent until proven guilty protections that anybody is entitled to in the United States of America, but make no mistake about it, the evidence and the thoroughness of this investigation, the multiple agencies involved, is pretty strong. They seem to have done a good job, but the thing that really upsets me, other than the fact that, of course, the supply of racism greatly outstrips the demand of racism, and this is another example of that, is the fact that all of these resources were wasted and they could have been better utilized on something else. But of course, because America's so obsessed with evil white racism, everything was poured into this particular case at the expense of other more crucial cases. Again, she was able to jump the line in terms of DNA testing, all because of what? Because she had a feeling based on the shape of a rope. And I'm not saying if this was real, it wouldn't be serious, but the fact is, the proportionality that we take these particular cases is what drives these people to fake their victimization. I'm sure at some point in time, had she really gone out there in the press conferences and made a big stink about it, she would have got a GoFundMe, she would have gotten a bunch of different various interviews, and now she's only going to face some possible time in jail, likely will get a fine, even though, again, she might have wasted hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in terms of manpower, resources, scientific testing, and all of that, and all for what? Just so she could be the most victimized person in Allentown, just so she could smear the reputation of that particular city in Pennsylvania? It's disgusting from top to bottom, but again, we will await the trial and all of that for her to potentially be adjudicated guilty or not guilty. But again, those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. As usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about yet another hate hoax. Till next time.